There we go. Okay, right. So let's go. Good evening. We will recap just briefly for those who couldn't join us last week. Although we actually spent most of the share on this very important Ketzos HaChoshen and two ways of understanding how effectively Chazaka works. We established in the Gemora. We are on Lamed. 1 second. Hold on. No, before that, Chof Test. Yeah, Chof Test on the Aleph. So we're actually up to the last narrow line where it says Tznan Cheskes Abatim. But just to briefly recap, we established that the Gemara says the third attempt, I think it was, of Rava, says the reason Chazaka is it's a svara that people only protect their documents for 2 years. The third year, beyond 3 years, beyond 3 years, people don't protect their documents anymore. And as a result, implication is, therefore, if someone else claims that you took it from him, you get ownership. Now we had a question with that. What does that mean? Well, how does that mean you actually own something just because you don't protect? We assume you don't protect your star anymore, right? Yeah. And on that, we explained there are broadly speaking, two approaches. There is the Ramban who says that it is what he says calls raglaim ladover. It's an assumption that, and this is the primary reason, that because the other person was quiet for 3 years and didn't say anything, when he should have really said something, he should have said to him, he should have said something to him, and he didn't, right? Therefore, it is assumed we assume that the correct and true owner is the person who is currently being machzik. The only problem was that in the 3 years during the 3 years there's a barrier in the way of us saying it belongs to the person who is living in the field at the moment, and that barrier is the fact that, well, if it's yours, where's your star? And that's what the Gemara establishes, that after 3 years that barrier is removed because people don't protect their documents longer than 3 years. And therefore, you fall back on the raglaim ladova, which is, well, because you didn't say anything, it's logical that it belongs to the guys in the field. The Ketzos HaChoshen himself disagrees with the Rambam, and he says it's a takonos chachomim, it's tikkun ha'olam, that because people don't look after their shtoros more than 3 years, effectively no one can ever buy a field and be safe and secure in his purchase, his acquisition, because you'd always have someone being able to turn up the next day and say, you agree that I used to own the field, and actually you never built it, and you took it from me, and all this type of thing. And therefore, as a result, the Chachomim were masaken that a person is ne'eman with the Chezka Shalosh Shanim, and a person who's got a claim against that, what we call the Ma'arer, the person who comes along and says, it's not really yours. He's got 3 years. Got 3 years to say something, and if he didn't, well, then it's his tough luck. That is what we said. Now, on that, then we had another statement of Rav Huna. And obviously, this is going to be relevant as we go on. I mean, we haven't even begun here. The Ramah discusses chazak of seats and shul. I mean, this is not. But houses and things is nothing. We've got to start with the chazak of seats and shul. Seriously, it's under Ramah here, right? I'll come to that maybe a bit later. Chazak on seats and shul is a major thing. Now the Gemara brings Rav Huna. Rav Huna says shalosh shonim is where you consume it rutzufos. That means to say it has to be consecutive. You can't have 1 year, year one. I'm just recapping. 1 year, which you can't say, well, I was in it for year one. I took a break on year two, but then I was there year 3 and 4. Add it up together, you get 3 years. That doesn't work, right? That doesn't work. Okay. And the Gemara had a bit of a problem with this because there was no chiddush in what Rav Huna said. That's what it says in the Mishnah. It says 3 years from day to day, meaning 3 years in one go. The Gemara said, no, you might think that this is just coming to exclude, the Mishnah is just coming to exclude years which are not complete. They're not, when it says from day to day, that just means, that means to say it can't be incomplete years. Like say, like a year of 3 months, for example, like we saw other cases in the Mishnah where it's 3 months at the end of the year, then a whole year, and then that's what it's that. But actually, if you have 3 complete years, maybe they can be even scattered, as in 1 year 1, year 3, and year 4. And that Rav Huna comes to tell you, no, that's not good, and it has to be 3 years consecutively. However, there's an important exception. Rav Chama told us to the halacha of Rav Huna. And that is, if it's the norm to leave fields fallow for a year, right, then you don't lose your chazaka by having a fallow year, because you've done what's the norm. The norm is to have a year which is fallow in the middle, if it's a place that they do so. And again, the Gemara says, isn't that obvious? It says, well, no, we're talking about scenario where some do leave it fallow and some don't. This one does. So you might think he can say to him, if it was really yours, you should have sown it normally. Some people don't leave fallow, some people do. The fact that you left it fallow is a bit dodgy. Why did you choose to do that? Yeah, because you're worried, you don't really own it. You want to sort of hide. So he says no, because he can say, I wasn't able to look after one fallow field amongst all, so one field that wasn't fallow, right, amongst all the other ones which were. Or he can simply say, I wanted to leave it fallow because it will be more productive. Because he can give, as long as he gives a solid logical argument, right, or we can give a solid logical explanation as to why he left the field fallow, he's fine. The Rashbam, if you recall, added in a very important point here, and that is, you still got to have 3 years. The year that you leave it fallow doesn't count as one of your 3 years, right? So, yeah. So I think it would be this. L'chara would be the same thing with Shemitah, right? Yeah. A year when it's expected for you to leave it fallow, because that's the norm in the area, is fine, and it won't break up your consecutive. But the years have to be in succession. But at the same time, you're still going to have 3 years. Years 1, 3, and 4 have to be. You're going to have 4 years in total in this case, and that means, of course, you have to look after your shtar for longer as well. Okay, you have to look after your shtar longer than that as well, because you know effectively that you're not gonna have chazaka with less than 3 years. And if you somehow manage to misplace your shtar in year 3, in the case when you've left year 2 fallow, you're in a very dangerous position, because he can say to him, "Ach v'shtarcha, show me your shtar," because you should have looked after it for longer, because you know the guy could get. That's what the Gemora says. Now the Gemora is saying a Mishnah, and the Mishnah says as follows: Tanan, it's our Mishnah. Yeah.
By year 3, and then year 3 chooses to fallow it. You're saying he's in a dodgy position, because you could say,
no, year 2 is fallow.
My example was year 2 is fallow. So he's got to keep his shtar up to the end of year 4.
He has to have about 3 years.
the third year.
Yeah, you have to look after your shtar for 3 years where you've worked the land. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
The third year, if you've done it for 2 years.
What are you calling the third year?
The year you would have had to produce it, but he's now saying, actually, it's fallow, therefore, I'm still good.
No, he's not good. You have to have 3 years where you work the land. The fallow year does not break up the 3 years. So you need 4 years. Because the fallow, yeah.
Well, if you're saying that the people keep a shot for 3 years.
Yeah, that's the yeah.
If you're in an area where they need 4, it's not logical.
So yeah, it's true. There's a little bit of an issue this, in the sense that if we say the assumption is that people don't look after their shtoros for longer than 3 years, then you can say, well, why would this person look after it any longer than 3 years? Just because he's left it a year fallow. The way the Rashbam phrases it is that v'tzorech lishmar shtora yosem shalosh shonim ach yilkot shalosh shonim. Right? He has to look after his document until he gets the full 3 years. If he ends up not keeping it that long, it's his own fault. Why do people? The logic seems to be like this. It's not that after 3 years people chuck away all their documents, right? That's not what we're saying. We're saying after using a field normally for 3 full years, and no one has knocked on your door in the meantime claiming it's yours, right? You do a grand clear out and you shred the paperwork, because you say, what on earth am I keeping these papers anymore? No one can possibly come along anymore and claim it's mine. But that will you'll only go through, the logic is you'll only go through that process if there's been 3 years of working the land, when someone else is gonna should have come and said something. That's the logic of the 3 years. It's 3 years of work. That's the point. Now, the Mishnah says, so the last narrow line, Cheskes Abatim. So the Mishnah, Cheskes Abatim, Chazok of houses. Now, the problem is, Batim, okay, houses, you know about them in the daytime, and you don't know about them in the nighttime, right? People don't know whether or not people are in there at night, and therefore, and you still see it's a chazaka. It still see it's a chazaka. Now, he can't possibly bring Adim. He can't possibly bring Adim that he's been there at night, right? That he's seen him living there even at night, okay? And if so, we're asking a question, Rav Huna. If Rav Huna is correct that the years of chazaka cannot be scattered, they have to be continuous the whole way through, every person who tries to prove chazaka on a house, okay, is always going to be in a position where the other person can say, I never saw you there at night. I never saw you there at night. You were only there half the time. Yeah, you were only there during the daytime. You weren't there at night. So that's why I didn't bother objecting. You know why I didn't bother objecting? Because you didn't really show ownership. You didn't really show ownership. You're only there 50% of the time. And remember, the other guy can't prove he was there at night. How's he going to prove he was there at night? He's not going to have Adim, 2 o'clock in the morning that he was in the house. No one's going to know, right? So therefore, we're asking, and it's true, it's a bit of a, in a way, it sounds like a bit of an extreme case. The point that Gemora is trying to get to, it would seem, is that if it's true that you always need, the idea of consecutive rutzufos is essential to the notion of chazaka, then chazaka itself, in many cases, is an impossibility. Because you can't prove that you were there continuously. You see, a field is not a problem, because a field, people aren't in at night. People are only in during the day. So that's continuous. That's continuous use. Continuous use is working Monday to Friday in the field, right? Normal hours. You're not expecting to be in the field on a Shabbos, right? Because you're not working the field on Shabbos, right? That's norm. That's normal. That's normal use, right? Same like with the field that's fallow. You've got a whole year that's normal use. Houses, you are in all the time, day and night, right? You are there all the time. And therefore, if it's true, you need continuous, you'll never be able to prove that. And therefore the guy can always claim, well, you weren't really showing ownership, were you? That's why I didn't bother to object.
I don't get what exactly are we trying to say?
The Gemora is doing what the Gemora often does.
Oh, I went
it's taking.
And I didn't see anybody there because it was night time, so therefore you didn't, therefore I didn't object.
That's right. I didn't bother.
Because even though you were in the house, I could see you because the lights were off and there was no light anywhere. So what kind of an argument is that?
Why not? Why not?
Because it's the way.
Exactly.
Absence of proof is not proof of absence.
No, but you have to remember that when it comes to chazaka, right? It comes to chazaka. If the ma'arer, the person who's claiming it to be his and questioning your chazaka, right, is able to find a way through what you're claiming, through saying that you didn't demonstrate normal usage, and you can't prove that you used it in a normal way, okay? He can always then fall back on the possibility of saying, well, you didn't use it normally, and because you didn't use it normally, that's why I didn't object.
But you could say that the way of the world, derech olam, is that
is
you're
what?
in your house. If you're in your house in the day, you're in your house at night. And why would you not be in the house at night? If you saw me during the day, why would you think I've got another accommodation elsewhere where I go to the night? I'm here first thing in the morning, I'm here last thing in the evening. Why would you actually think that just because you can't see? So it comes back to my absence of proof.
Yeah, I understand, but
I was saying I could walk past your house at 3 a.m. every morning.
yeah,
I have no idea anyone's living there. I do that every night of the year.
we're effectively trying to disprove Rav Huna by taking an extreme case. We're trying to, if you take Rav Huna's principle which is that chazaka must be continuous. That's Rav Huna's state, right? Chazaka must be continuous, right? So we're trying to disprove Rav Huna by deliberately taking an almost like an extreme case, and we're saying, if it's true what you're saying, no, you're right. I understand what you're saying. This seems like a very difficult argument to get your head around. But if you look at it again as an attempt to disprove Rav Huna, right? Rav Huna says chazaka must be continuous. So we say you can't be right because there are many cases where you can never prove continuous usage, and yet there's still a chazaka. You got to appreciate the angle the Gemora is coming at. The Gemora is trying to establish whether Rav Huna's din is correct. Rav Huna's din is chazaka must always be continuous, unless there is a normal usage. It fits with the normal use. For example, a year fallow, whatever, right, which happens to be normal in that area. This is not normal. This is the case which is not normal. It's not normal use if you nighttime. You have to be able to prove a house. Normal existence in a house is both day and night. You would never be able to prove you were there at night. Therefore, Rav Huna must be wrong because the whole cheskas abatim goes out the window. That's the argument the Gemara is making. It's an argument. It's not. It's an argument. It's an extreme argument to try and bring Rav Huna. Hold on, we haven't finished with this. Just wait. Let's just wait a second. Let's just see the whole thing, and then we'll see if it resolves itself. The difficulty with this. The Gemara's immediate answer to this is, Omar Abai. Abai says not a problem because. And Abai doesn't take the angle that you want to take. The Abai says you can bring edus. Man masid habatim. Who brings evidence? Who are you going to bring as edim that you lived in the house? You're going to need edim. Neighbors. Shivavi. Maybe neighbors know everything, right? The mama belelia. Your neighbors know when you're there. They know you're there at night, the day. Neighbors know everything about their neighbors. That's what neighbors are for, right? They know everything. So they know if you're there day and night. Not a problem, right? Not a problem. Pardon? Yeah, in a town. Yeah, only in a town. Yeah, and therefore it would be technically more challenging to prove it. But you're always going to have that problem in your deserted farmhouse, aren't you? Right? You're always going to have that problem. Forget about the nighttime issue, right? If you're not, how are you going to marshal evidence? It might be difficult. That's right. It might be difficult. Yeah.
And of course, there are times to go on holiday.
Yeah, and we'll cut and those cases will we discussed, I think, in the Gemara. You know, when people are absent. By the way, both can go on holiday. The person who's claiming it's his can also be on holiday for long periods of time, and therefore he can sometimes turn around and say, "I wasn't present to be able to object. I didn't witness you in the house because I'm away a lot of business." No, not necessarily, because he can argue and say, every time I came home, you knew my schedule. You knew that I turned up once every 3 months. So you made sure not to be in the house once every 3 months. That's a potentially a legitimate argument he can make. We'll have to see. Now this is okay. Right. Now there's another. Rava gives another solution. Rava Amar could go into Osu Beitrei. The case would be where two Adim came along, V'omri, and they said, Anon agrinon mine, we hired it from him, V'darinon bei, Talas shnin b'moma b'lelia, we hired it from him, and we lived in it for 3 years, day and night. Right? It's interesting. That's their argument. The argument is that they come along and they say, well, we're two Adim, and we're saying that we rented it, and we lived in it for 3 days there. What's the obvious problem with this? Yeah, Omale, Rav Yemel Ravashi. That's not a solution. Rav Yemel said to Ravashi, Hani Nogin Beidus name. They're Nogia Beidus. They are immediately not able to testify about themselves. Why are they Nogia Beidus? They're not testifying for their own benefit. They're testifying for the person who rented it to them. But the Eloi Omri Hochi, because if they don't say this, if they don't say that we rented it from him for 3 years, Amin on Lahu, we would say to them, Zilu Havule Agabesa Lahai, go and pay your rent to the other guy. You should never have paid rental to this guy. You understand? Jamie, just press the button on the thing, otherwise keep blowing calls. If people are hot, let me know. Right? So thank you. So basically they'll say you'll have to pay your rental to the other bloke. So therefore they are going to want to say and establish the position of the person they rented the property from. Otherwise, they've got a major issue because they paid 3 months' rent to someone who was actually a gunner, and they're going to have to go 3 years rent. Yeah, 3. So what did I say? 3. Yeah, 3 years.
Why is that a good challenge?
What,
you could tell that's the whole point of Edus. then let them make that edus, and then you challenge them.
No, well, the point is that they that it's not a good solution because they can't. The edus is not useful. You can't believe the edus, right? We're trying to find a case where you can have testimony edus for 3 years, right, consecutively, day and night. Well, 1 second, just hold 1 second. One more line. Omalei, so he said back to him. Ravashi said back to him. Daini deshvile, which means like lowly dayanim, who are not expert in din. Daini hochi. They judge cases like this. They judge cases like this to accept this edus if they've already given the payment to the person who rented it to them. Milo askinon, are we not dealing with a case going to Nakiti Agar Besa? They are holding the rental payment. V'omri, and they come to us and they say, V'omri leman leisvei. Who should we give the money to? So now they're not going to get edus. You understand? There are people who have lived in this property for 3 years. Okay, they come and knock on the door of the Beis Din, and they say, "Well, I don't mind. Doesn't make a difference to me. It's the same money, right? I don't mind giving it to Ruvain. I don't mind giving it to Shimon. You sort out between you. But I'll tell you one thing: we were there. We rented it, and we were there 3 years, day and night. And that's how, says Rava, you can have a case where you can establish a person who's used it consecutively for 3 years and three years consecutive, right, day and night. Okay, so we have two solutions to the problem. Abai and Rava. Abai's solution is neighbors always know. They know day and night, not a problem. Rava's solution is, which by the way would cover your farmhouse case, Ellie, yeah? Right? Where people who are living in it, rented it, they come along and say, we want to make the payment now, and we've been there 100% day and night, who should we pay to? Now, the reason why, again, this is very common. The reason why this sounds like a bit sort of difficult and why are we worrying about this so much? Again, all we're trying to do is work out whether Rav Huna's halacha, Rav Huna's din, that it must be consecutive, is viable. His din will not be viable if the Mishnah doesn't work. The Mishnah is chesed about him 3 years, 3 years, which means day and night. According to Rav Huna, have to be consecutive, day and night. How could you ever have a case when it's consecutive? Abai and Rava give solutions which Rav Huna can make. Because Rav Huna can make those solutions to our Mishnah, right? His din still stands. It's the same as every case. When you ask a question on someone, we've mentioned this in the past, right? Someone establishes a halach. Rav Huna has a halach. I want to disprove this halacha. How am I going to disprove this halacha? I'm going to say, because the way you've established your halacha means that the Mishnah doesn't make sense. That can't be right. You must be wrong, Rav Huna, right? You can't be right because the Mishnah doesn't make sense. Rav Huna has options. That's the answer. Rav Huna has options. Abai, Rava, I can explain the Mishnah like this, I can explain the Mishnah like that. And therefore, don't interfere. Don't cause me a problem from the Mishnah. I've got my solutions. You don't like it, I know. Don't like it, do you? It's an okimta. It's a way, that's what okimta is. And okimta is you cannot destroy my argument because I have a way of explaining the Mishnah in this way. You might tell me it's far-fetched, I don't care. You can't, it doesn't make a difference. You can't destroy my argument because I can understand it in that way. I have two logical ways of explaining it. You don't think so? Okay, let's see Rashi first. Let's see Rashi.
Is this an addendum to the point that we've been making previously about, we've been trying to prove or disprove where this idea that 3 years works, right? And now, and within that equation, we're saying that it has to be consecutive.
Yes.
And it
has to be consecutive. That's right.
It's past the point of saying it has to be 3 years. You said we established why.
What do you mean? Has to be 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, this is separate halacha. Yeah. Now we're going on to the next. That's right. We're going to the next. The next point is you have to. Okay, we established it's got to be 3 years. Now we're saying those 3 years have to be consecutive. That's all separate halacha. That's right. And we said that's got to work. And that's got to fit in with the Mishnah. Yeah. Let's see the Rashbam and then we'll see if we still got a problem. Should we open the door, put it on again? I don't mind. Whatever you prefer. It's getting a bit warm in here. You want to open the door? Open the thing? Sorry. Okay. See if it gets too hot. Okay. You don't want people to be uncomfortable. I'll fall asleep. Now, the Rashbam says like this. We did that. Right. Where it says Beleli lo yodoi, a few Rashbams halfway through the white line to the bottom of the Omid. Yes. Beleli lo yodoi. So at night time we said neighbors Neighbors are not aware. No one knows. No one knows. You can't bring Eidim. So Rashbam explains why that's a problem for Rav Huna. Va'afilu hochi have chazaka. Even if though you don't have anyone at night, it's still a chazaka. The Bishlam Agabi Soder with a field, B'chol Hanoch, and the other cases, Ein Darkon La'asos Melocha Balayla. People don't work at night. When he brings Eidim that he's worked the field for the days of 3 years, that's a good chazaka. Abul Batim houses, people live in them at night. You can't bring witnesses that he was there at night because he hasn't got witnesses for night. Therefore, they are scattered, they are separate, right? They are mefuzoros, right? They are not consecutive. And if Rav Huna was correct, hamotzi idach lemitan, the other person can claim, ani ro'isi, I saw shelo yisa dar b'leilos, I saw that you didn't live there at night, right? That's why I didn't bother objecting. Because you demonstrated the love to Tachavoy. It's not really yours. Why is it chazaka? Why is it chazaka? You've demonstrated that it is not really yours because you haven't lived there in a normal way. Now, if you just think about this for a second, right? Do you remember how the Ramban explains it? How does the Ramban explain the whole logic here? The Ramban says it's true. Really, just because you don't keep your documents doesn't give you ownership. What gives you ownership? You're claiming it's yours, and you're claiming it's yours, right? We've got a problem based on. Don't know what to do. Could be yours, could be yours. We don't know. We're not Nufiim. So we say like this: because you kept quiet for 3 years, okay, it's probably not yours. You're probably lying because you should have said something within 3 years. So if I have a legitimate, let me say, if I have a legitimate reason why I didn't say anything, then that falls away. That falls away. And even according to the Ketzos, who says that the idea is that it's a takana for the kuchos. The idea is buyers would have to be that you're believed. Is also based on the fact that we say to the person who's questioning this, you object within 3 years. You've got your chance. But again, if you can have a legitimate reason why you didn't object during 3 years, then the basis of why we're giving falls away. That is a legitimate position to take. And if that's the case, you no longer have a right to claim the field as your own.
Can you make a shvur?
No. Forget about shvurs. Not here. Yeah, it's not going to help you. It's not going to transfer ownership. Shvurs are specific halachas in specific cases. When we implement them, when we use them, how we use them. It's not going to say that was around. It doesn't help. We'll come on to shulei. The sugar talks about. It doesn't help. There's the particular cases when a shvur is useful. Right, it doesn't help here. Well, there's other cases, certain other cases it helps, right? For example, with 1A, there are cases when shvur is relevant. Yeah.
It's strange you never established a land registry. No, but Israel would have been an obvious place for it because of the whole division of the land according to the tribes.
Yeah.
Right. So therefore, you always have this issue of reverting back to the original tribal ownership.
So you need to keep
those records anyway. So it's strange that they never came up with a land registry concept.
Yeah, I think though it's a little bit difficult for us to get our heads around the fact what it means to live in a world without paper. The incredible difficulty of keeping records for any length of time.
Yeah,
we're so used to documentation.
Yeah, I was wondering. I'm not sure it's a case of after 3 years you can say, "Oh, I don't want this anymore, throw it away." I think it's a case of material.
It's just serious.
So therefore, it's actually
that's right.
Deterioration.
Yeah.
So basically,
it's true. Bits of pottery and things like that. But it's still. Absolutely. 100%.
If you have a look at that Haftarah, the Gemora talks about it. 10th paragraph.
That's right.
About the Haftarah from Bechokosai with Yirmiyah Novi. That's but from Bahar. Where all those things then, so clearly at some point they then reverted to that sort of system.
They did, it's a very good point. Yeah, exactly. This pasuk in a Satan between Cheres and Man Yamdu Yom Rabbim, you should put in earthenware vessels so that it lasts for a long time. But again, that proves the point in a way, right? It was unusual. It was exceptional to do that. People didn't really do that. They had to be told.
make sure you put it in a kli cheres so that it lasts.
If
You
you
know,
don't,
if you don't, it's finished, it's gone, right?
And that was just because the Churban was coming up as well, and they knew that everything was going to be lost. So
Right. People ask, for example, I think, as far as I recall, this is like people sometimes ask, why is there no quote unquote evidence of the existence of the Jewish people in Mitzrayim? You know why?
climate.
Because they lived in Goshen, right? The Nile and the whole basin, there's nothing there. There's nothing that survived. You're not talking about the desert with the pyramids and, where you can sort of like try and uncover some evidence of, of pottery or whatever it was, right? There is nothing.
Been washed away.
Things didn't stay. They just didn't stay. They dissolved. They disintegrated. There wasn't like, what are you going to find there that's useful, right? It's the same thing. So I think we have to bear that in mind, that things didn't really survive for long. Also, if you start making what?
I'm not talking about the times you're sure the shape things, talking about when those things have long since gone.
No, okay, fine. But I still think that if you establish a requirement, I think the Gemora talks about this elsewhere. If my memory serves me correctly, I think it's in Gittin. You see, the problem is like this: if you put the onus on a person to guard what the Gemara calls it, l'shmor shtarim min ha'achbarim. That's what the Gemara calls it. You have to guard your shtar from mice, right? That's a huge burden on an individual, especially in the context of where documents are much harder to protect. If you make him preserve his documentation forever, in theory it's possible. And you're right, in theory, would there be a central registry? But there is no central registry for whatever reason. So you're basically putting the burden on the person who bought it, right? And the Gemara has a real problem with that. There are other sugis about this. The Gemara says, you're putting the requirement on him to guard it forever, and that's a very difficult thing to put him on, to put the burden on him. So there are limitations on that. We don't want to put those requirements on people necessarily. Let's finish the last few Rashbams. Shivavi is Shashchenim Shaloi. His neighbors Shaul Dorba Yom Balayla. He's seen him live there day and night. They are accustomed to testify. That was Abaya's answer. Shivavi Mediadoi. They know Vim Yitzon V'Yomar, and if he makes the claim when he says, I see Sadi that they are to baby on Belelio, bring me Adim that you lived in it day and night. Yuchlu Lahoidlo. They're able to give that edus. They're able to testify.
Can he be his own aid?
No, you can never testify for yourself. Umiu.
The way you have yourself as one of the two.
No, not as you can't be an aid for yourself to claim anything on your behalf. Not in that context. You're not allowed.
There is a situation where you do have one aid, and you are one of them.
Not.
You bring yourself as an aid. I've seen tomorrow.
We have to find out what a case is, because normally you can't resolve. Definitely not. Definitely for ownership, monetary matters. Absolutely, yeah.
You have the situation. Something.
What?
Be behind yourself,
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Right. Yeah. All right. Right. Well, there's when you say any other Mason for Rosh or not. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But no, it's not anyway. Not certainly not for him. You can't come into Basin and say I own something because you've got otherwise. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Umiu. Now the Russian adds a few very important words. Umiu are non-lo tani non-lay kid mefarish b'samach. The Gemara is going to explain that we don't make this claim for him. That means to say, if you come along and say, we'll come back to this and explain it more when we get to the next bit of Gemara. We do not say, bring Adim, that you were there for day or night. It's just that it's a legitimate position, potentially, for the Ma'arer, the one who's claiming it's his, to take. That means like this. You come along and you say, I've been in the field for 3 years, and it's my field. It's not that we then present you with a list of requirements. The Beis Din say, right, okay, start ticking the boxes, fill in the form, 35 pages. And page 25, clause 13 says, have you got evidence that you were there during the night? Yeah, tick. A, do you have neighbors? Or B, did you rent it to someone who can? We don't do any of that. Do you understand? We don't put you in a position of needing to prove that you were there at night. It's just that if the other guy plays this card, you with me? Then you have to respond to it. All right? You'll see what there are certain cases where we don't go out of our way to make a claim. to make a claim to claim that you need to prove this thing. Okay, we'll come back to that when we get there. If they don't testify that the house belongs to the owner, this was in Robert's solution, then they're gonna have to pay the money again. So we said no. The case is, he said back to him, Dayani Deshvili, Sheinon Bekim Bedin, lowly Dayanim, we're not expert in din, Dayani Hochi, they judge like this, the Kabbalah Elu to accept the edus of these people, in Kvarnos to Scharabayas, if they've already given the payment, Lamaske, to the renter. Rav was never talking about that case. Rav was only talking about a case where the people are here with the money, they're asking us, who should we give it to? And they say, we lived here day and night, continuously. That case is when we can believe them, because they're not Negea. Makes no difference to them. They give it to Reuven, give it to Shimon, doesn't matter, right? Therefore, we can believe them they were there and there at night, and therefore Rav Huna has his case, has his solution, and his rule still stands. Yeah, it's quite important, halacha, because it is the halacha. We do pass like Rav Huna, that has to be consecutive. Okay, yes. Right, any questions? Okay, is anything clear?
Don't quite get this business with the renters saying, we don't really know who we've rented from. We just have to give the money to whoever. I mean, you're making a deal when you rent a house. You know who the landlord is.
No, but they've heard that. No, they know.
They've been brought into a dispute.
Yeah, now there's a dispute over the land. That can happen a lot.
So they went from some guy, right?
Yeah.
And then 6 months in, you might see they're paying.
They haven't paid yet.
They haven't paid. No, they haven't paid yet. Yeah, and then there comes a knock at the door and says, "Hi, I'm the landlord." And they say, "Oh, you're not the landlord. It was that other bloke."
Yeah.
And then they say, "Well, hang on a minute. Yeah, who is it I'm meant to be paying?
That's right.
Is it you or is it you?"
And he said, "I don't care.
I don't care.
I don't care what I'm the money to. Sort it out between you."
You mean they've signed a rental agreement with Reuven,
And they haven't paid.
they haven't paid, and Shimon turns up and says, "I'm actually."
Yeah, look, by the way, their rental could be like a sharecropper, right? So they could have been, the rental is I'm working the land and I'm giving you a portion of the crops, right? You can say, why were they not paid yet? Well, because the crops aren't there yet. Yeah, you're thinking about like, Brent Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking about a case where you've gone up to 3 years.
I was going to say, you're so
Yeah,
they're
all right.
saying,
Well, you never know.
Reuven
Could
has
happen.
come to that 3 years to claim its money. Last business was that.
Except you've also got
Doesn't
to bear in mind there are cases like the one where talk about in Gittin where someone goes to travel for business and he's gone, for
That's true as well.
for years.
Yeah. I see that here as well. I
Right.
see that here as well.
So there were absolutely scenarios where,
Yeah.
the guy's just not there, right?
But again, you have to reiterate again and again. This is Anokimta. We are mokimit. We fit it in. We have a solution for Rav Huna, and it's a viable solution. And therefore, you can't destroy his argument.
The halacha of Moshe, like Rav.
Yeah, has to be is continuous. Yeah, has to be continuous. But with various exceptions, right? Various exceptions. There are cases when you don't need to, like we said, it's very normal usage, normal for a fellow. That's it, right? Now,
But just to be clear, the reasons why it has to be with suppose
Yeah.
the same as why we said the chazakah takes effect after 3 years.
no, because why does it have to be Ritzufos? Because he can object. He can say, if it's not Ritzufos, he can say, the reason why I didn't make a fuss was because I didn't see you have demonstrated that it's not really yours. You've demonstrated it's not yours. There's no point in making a fuss. You're not showing normal ownership. Normal ownership is to be there continuously for 3 years. And therefore, again, because he's got a valid argument, your whole claim to the land falls away. Your claim is, you should have interrupted me. That's the logic, the whole logic of chazaka. Again, chazaka is a raya. It's a proof. It's all it is. It's a proof. It's not a kinyan. It's a proof of ownership. You've got to prove you own it. Prove you own it. How do you prove you own it? You live normally for an extended period of time. No one says anything. Well, that's a proof that it's yours.
But what I'm saying,
Either through Takanas Chachamim or because Raglaim not double, like we said.
saying is basically that in order for your knockback of the moral tying that
Yeah, that's right.
to live in it normally. Yeah, it's
To say, well, you weren't there, or whatever.
it's
You have to be.
yeah.
You have to demonstrate it.
Yeah, exactly. You need to look at all of these questions of chazaka, and this is continuous the whole way through these sugyas, as a game of table tennis, ping pong, between the two of them. There are two players. That's turn venitum. That is Hilchos turn venitum. Anything in turn venitum, we have a claim and a counterclaim. That is what happens. You go backwards and forwards, and the winner is the one who can land that knockout blow. Okay, that's literally how you have to think about it. It's the best thing to know. And the one who can land the knockout blow is if I can say to you, hold on a minute, right? It's not true. You can't possibly own this field because you would have said something within 3 years, and I was using it completely normally, and no one said anything. So obviously it's mine. That in the simple case is the knockout blow. No, we'll come to those cases. Those cases are very important. When a person is normally, we'll come to them. Yeah. Now let's see Mazutra. Mazutra says, and now the Rashbam learns Mazutra is really a new case, a new piece. Although it's related obviously to this. V'itoin v'omar. If the person makes a claim and says, Leisu treisadi lasudi leid dorbe tlashshoni b'yamomo ubalelia, bring 2 edim to testify that he was there for 3 years, day and night. Ta'ano seitano. His taina is a good claim. He's allowed to make that claim. Okay, let's go straight to the Rashbam. Explains what this means. The last Rashbam on the Omer. Says the Rashbam, this is a new case. It's a new issue. It's obvious to Mazutra that even though all these Amoraim above required 3 continuous years, even so, or consecutive, even so, they don't obligate the machzik lahavi edim to bring edim shio idu befeirush that will testify explicitly al kol hayomim v'haleilas on all the days and the nights. And this is going to deal with a lot of the problems you've had with what we said until now. You'll see. Ela Rava, what did they understand? How did Amoraim understand how it works in practice? In practice, it works like this: your idu stam, the edim testify without going into details. Shira'u dar gimel shonim, that they see that he lived there for 3 years, right? That's what they testify. Okay, or mistoma, and it's logical. Im bayomim dar, the Bach changes a bit. If he was there in the day, right? Av balelas dar, he was probably there at night too. You got these, I bring my trustworthy edim who say are prepared to get up there in court and say, I'm not related to Ruvain, I'm not going to get Edus, I am prepared to testify in this court of law that this man lived in this field or lived in this house for 3 years. What do we mean? How do we interpret those words? It is exactly the point you had a problem with before. Both of you understand? How do you interpret those words day and night? You don't go into detail. Did you see him on the Tuesday after the Tuesday night at 3 a.m.? Of course you don't do that, right? That's not how it works. I'll give you a practical example from stuff I'm involved in all the time in the base. Okay? One of the things that we require is absolutely essential to being able to establish whether a person is legitimately allowed to get married is something called evidence of single status. Okay? Evidence of single status. How do you prove you're single? Jewish status we prove because you bring your parents' ksuba. Okay, that's how you prove Jewish status, right? How do you prove single status? Yeah, you write a letter. What? Not overdrawn. So you bring. It's very simple. We ask people to do the following thing. You have to bring a letter which testifies to your single status. Now, it's not like Eidos in a base there. So it's not a problem if it's a close relative. On the contrary, here it's helpful it's a close relative because they have direct knowledge, right? So you ask to bring a proof. What's your proof? The letter says, you bring a letter which says, I declare that Miss Jones is a single and has never been married before. And that letter can be written, my daughter, that letter can either be written by, let's say, a parent, or it can be written by someone of professional standing who's prepared to stake their professional reputation, so-and-so solicitor, whatever it is, something like that. Or it can be by a Rav, for example, where the Rav knows the family very well, and then family for many years, etc. Now, let me ask you a simple question, right? How does anyone know whether at 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 years ago, right, she accepted Kiddushin from someone in front of two Eidim, right? In a dark alleyway.
Yeah.
No, there's lots of things you can say about that. How does anyone know? What? Oh, that's the answer. Who does that though, right? In other words, you basically say, I know this family really well. I know these people really well. I know that perhaps it's my kid or whatever, right? And they're single. What? Now, again, it's a bit dangerous to do what I've just done because I kind of brought a moshel from Evan Oezer right onto Choshen Mishpah, and you've got to be very careful about that. It's different rules, different, right? It's not the same. Okay, it's not the same. As you said, for example, rules of evidence, evidentiary rules are not exactly the same. And it's a bit of a question as to why we allow, for example, a parent to write it. Okay, yeah, but we do. There's various reasons, why that works. It's based on we're building up our picture. There are chazakas here and things like that. We're building up pictures of status. It's a different, but the idea is the same as we're expressing here. That you can never know for sure, But at the same time, if a person walks into Beis Din and says he's been there for 3 years, so we assume that means nighttime as well. Okay.
So Mazutra is effectively saying.
No, there's not Mazutra yet. I haven't got to Mazutra yet. All we've said so far is how you understand everything we've learned until now, since we started Rav Huna, as to how it works in practice. This answers all of the points that you were raising before. Do you understand?
So
What was your problem? Pardon? Yeah, but yeah. No, what was your problem? Maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is what everyone's problem with this piece was, right? How on earth can I prove? Am I really going to have to bring Adam down? It's like, right? It's not going to. Yeah, I'm going to bring Adam for 3 years, and that means 3 years day and night. That's what it means. Okay. So that's how it works in practice. However, the Ka'oma Mazutra. Now look at the Rashbam carries on. Now Mazutra says to that, Di'itoin ma'arev ba'oma, I see Sadi v'chulu. If the ma'arev, the person who's claiming it's his, claims and says, I want you to bring witnesses, to bring Eidim that you've been there day and night, Ta'anosoi Ta'ano. He is legitimately allowed to make that claim. The Tzorech Shavoy Eidim Shalelos V'yomim, and he needs to bring Eidim for day and night. Right? Now, the question obviously is why? If it's enough for me to bring Eidim, there's a lot in these Rashbams. You have to take them sort of slowly, bit by bit. They're very long, but they are worth it. So, if it's true that it's enough for me to bring Eidim, and we're going to interpret those Eidim as being, well, that means day and night, 3 years. I know they're there 3 years. All right. So how is it that this guy can suddenly introduce an outrageous claim, and say, oh, well, I want witnesses that you were there at 3 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday?
Is he saying every day and every night?
Yes. And he wants to do that, doesn't he? Because he wants to get you out of the field or the house. The house, not the field, not the field. The field you can't see. You have to moment.
You can see it.
It's only in a house you can say that. It's a field you're not there.
But it's not the field, you can see it if it works.
No, but the field you can't say that. People aren't in the field.
No, but even then, it's obvious for everyone that goes.
No, absolutely. I'm saying the field people aren't in the field. Yeah. So the answer is like this. Why is he allowed to do this? To given the Toyin Tainas Bori, since he says a claim which is definite, certain. The Ka'omar, he says, Aniru Isib Shaloi Dar Balelos Pavesi. He stands up in Beis Din, he makes a definite claim, he says, I saw that he was not there at night. That's why I didn't object. Because I saw he wasn't there at night. That's why I'm saying, I see Sadi, bring witnesses to Dor Beis Shnid. That he lived there for 3 years, whether night or day. That's why he has to bring Eidim to contradict him, and say to him that he should have objected. So Mazutra is saying, as I go back to the Gemora now, if he makes the claim and says, bring 2 Eidim to testify that he lived in it for 3 years, day and night, that is a valid claim. You're allowed to make the claim. You're not allowed. We don't make that claim. Beis Din don't introduce this requirement. We say we're happy to accept Eidim of 3 years, and we'll interpret that day or night. But if the person is a really stubborn guy, and he is intent on trying to get you out, okay, it's a legitimate thing for him to request. And then you've got a problem.
You said that he has to claim.
Yeah, he has to make the claim.
At night.
Yeah, he has to say, he's get up in Beis Din and he says, I saw that you were not there at night.
Does that mean I saw you were somewhere else?
No, I knew I saw that you were not there. I don't know where you were, but you were not in my house at night. You were not in the house, my house at night. I stood there with binoculars. I looked through every window, through the cracks in the curtains. You weren't there. No matter how he says it, he says, "I'm telling you, you were not there at night." I'm making a definite claim based. Remember, this protects the buyer somewhat. It's a bit of chutzpah to do that. You've got to lie in court. You've got to do all sorts of things. It's not like everyone's going to make this claim. Okay, you're providing a level of protection here. But it is a valid statement, a valid request, a valid argument for you to make. Because
would the same go if he said, "I didn't see you there during the day," on the basis that it's not, I mean, pandemic aside, it's not derech b'nei odom to be in their house during the day. So would he have the same machor if he said, "Okay, I accept you were there in the night, but during the day you weren't there"?
So I think it's a fair point, and I think it would depend on the context. The way the Rashbam seems to phrase it here is that he makes a claim about nights in general. It's not that he says a one-off night, because that would be normal use. I'm allowed to go on holiday. I'm allowed to take off a few weeks in the summer, and you can't come back to me and say, otherwise you'd never have chazaka. So it can't be that he can claim every night. I know I mentioned 3 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, but it can't mean that. It must. He says a night. You weren't there at night. He makes a broad claim about nights in general.
No, that's why I'm asking. If he says, "Okay, you weren't there in the days," would the same?
That's what I'm saying. No, that's what I'm saying. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So again, if he says, "Well, you were never there in the day," and you can bring evidence and clear proof that you acted totally normally by going to the office at normal office hours, and you were in the house when it would be expected that normal people are at home, etc., right? Then presumably he hasn't got a leg to stand on because you've acted normally. That's no worse than even the Ma'ara has no leg to stand on. Yeah, exactly.
So I just don't really understand it. What Marsuk's just basically saying is, this has all come about because there's no paperwork anymore, right? You've got return the Nitan. He's claiming it's that he never sold it to Reuben's claiming he never sold it to Shimon. Shimon's saying, I've lived in it, right? Okay, I've been living in it, and you haven't come forward and made a claim, right? So, but now here we're basically saying, oh, forget all of that. We're now actually saying, even when this one's claiming one thing, that one's claiming the other, but there's no, they don't have any evidence that, the Marokkan could just come along and demand something, some.
You think it's an outrageous claim?
I think it's basically throwing it's throwing the whole point of Chazaka. Really.
Why?
Out of the window.
Why?
Because basically you're just saying, well, Chazaka, forget Chazaka here. What you have to do as the Nitan is provide Eidim to support. So it's like the Eidim are like effectively like an equivalent to the shtar.
No, the Eidim are necessary because if there is no Eidus that you've been there. Again, let's be clear. We've assumed until now. Why have we not mentioned Eidim until now? One second. Why have we not mentioned Eidim until now? Let's put it like that, right? We haven't been discussing it. What? Yeah, why did we not mention Eidim? No, we did. The reason why we didn't mention Eidim until now is because it was never up for debate. There was no debate about whether or not you were in the field. The question was only whether you were there for 3 years. Obviously, I need to prove. Obviously, if I need to prove that I've been there for 3 years, I'm going to need data. That's not strange. If I come to Beis Din, right? We're both in Beis Din, Chaim and Nitan, and you say to me, I say to you, this is my field. I say to Beis Din, this is my field. This piece of prime real estate, this palace or whatever, is my house. Why? Because I've been there for 3 years, right? The first level of defense that the other guy is going to have is, no, you weren't. You're lying. So obviously, I'm going to have to bring Eidim to show me I was there. I'm going to have the neighbors and everyone else, and my car was in the drive, and they saw my wife going out of the house or whatever it is. You're going to bring up you're going to build up a picture. That's normal evidential rules.
I'm just thinking about time. I'm thinking about time scales here. Up to what point can the tone make this claim? After 3 years?
No. Well, I see.
The first 3 years.
No. Obviously after 3 years. After 3 years.
His whole point is he hasn't made the claim in the first 3 years, because if he had, we wouldn't be here.
If you make the claim in If you make the claim in the first 3 years, and I don't have a star, then you walk away. You win the jackpot. You take the house back. Why? Because you say, "Ach, mi shtarcha, where's your star? Show me your star." You're finished. You're finished. Yeah. Now, this is how it is. There is a basic. Just to finish on this one point. The beginning of the Toras, just a very brief point here. Toras asked the obvious question. The Rabbi Mordechai is the last Toras on the Amik of Tesam Daled. We're going to finish with this. The Rabbi Mordechai says we haven't finished Mazzutra. We'll come back to him tomorrow. Not tomorrow, next time. But anyway, the Re asks the obvious question. If it's true what the Rashbam is saying, so why shouldn't we ask the question? Maybe the Edom don't know about the night. If you're allowed to make the claim, if the person's allowed to claim, well, bring evidence about night. So we always test Edom, right? For what they're saying. Who says you're accurate or whatever he does, right? He says b'chol edios onu dorshin yofer. With all edus, we ask the right questions. We make sure they know maybe they don't know anything about night. How can you rely on the fact if they come and say it was there for 3 years? Who says that means nighttime, right? Why shouldn't we misophic investigate them to see if they really do mean nights as well, without the other guy claiming? Simple question, right? So he says, "V'lav perchi." It's not a question. Last line on the Amud of the Tosfos. The kiven sheyidu ala yomim, since they test about the daytime, afilu yomru ein on yodin ala leilos. Even if they say we don't know about night, mistoma, it's logical. Kiven shedor b'yomim dor nami b'leilos. We assume he was also there at night. Unless the person who's claiming that he stole it argues that he was definitely not there at night. Everything rests on him making a claim, introducing a new claim and saying, I am standing up here and saying, definitely this guy was not there at night.
But that always comes back to what I was saying. Does he have to say, well, I saw you somewhere else? Do you see what I'm saying?
No, because it's a claim. He's allowed to make, it's a legitimate claim for him to make. He might be lying through his teeth, okay? But he is allowed to make that claim in order, and that will prompt us to add an additional requirement on you to bring Eidim to prove that you were there nighttime as well, okay? The interesting thing is, there's going to be some scenarios, and the example, which we'll do next time we meet Hashem, is like, for example, a peddler. If the ma'ara, the person who is claiming that he owns the field, and the squatter stole it from me. If he's a person who is often not in town, he's a peddler who goes around lots of other cities. He's often not in town. So then we will make the claim on his behalf, okay? Because maybe there are lots of opportunities for such a person. There's lots of opportunities for people to take his property. So we need to protect. The pendulum is going to swing. If you're a person who spends a lot of time out of town on work, so the pendulum is going to swing to based on going to look at it, right? We need to support you, not the person, not the guy who's because you're a real risk of people taking advantage of you. So therefore, we're going to introduce a claim, even if you don't make that claim, right? Because it's a bit difficult to make that claim. He was definitely not there at night. I saw he wasn't there at night, right? It's not such an easy thing to say. Sometimes we will introduce that on his behalf to protect him. But that's for next time.
We don't say about how he sold
Hmm?
We don't about how he sold
No, we'll come on to that another time, because that point is important, that he always has to have a valid claim, like you sold it to me. That's important. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, thank you for joining. Yeah. Oh, you want to have a minute? Okay. Rabbi Chaim Kashem is Gosh Baruch Zakes Israel Pichel and Thomas Rabbi Nechbeit Matzik Tev Tev Yadir.